Most people assume success feels like a steady, upward climb, where each step brings clarity, confidence, and a quiet sense of arrival. But if you listen closely to those who have already reached what others admire, there is often a subtle hesitation in how they describe it, not because success is empty, but because it quietly alters something deeper than circumstances. It begins to reshape the way a person experiences themselves, and this shift is rarely visible from the outside, where everything still appears controlled, intentional, and composed. Yet internally, something more complex begins to unfold, because success does not simply reward behavior, it interacts with identity, and identity itself is not stable. It is something constantly being adjusted by the mind based on feedback, expectations, and emotional responses. So when achievement increases, recognition follows, and the brain starts linking performance with validation in a way that feels natural but slowly becomes structural. And this is where a less obvious pattern begins to form. Because the motivation that once came from reaching a goal starts to transform into something else, something less about reaching and more about maintaining. And this shift is deeply connected to how the mind processes reward. Since dopamine is not primarily released when something is obtained, but when it is anticipated during the pursuit, in the moments leading up to achievement. And so, when success is reached, the feeling of satisfaction is often brief, not because it lacks value, but because the brain immediately recalibrates, turning what once felt significant into something normal, something expected. And from the outside, this can look like ambition or discipline. But from within, it can feel like a loop where progress provides relief without ever fully allowing rest. And people respond to this loop in very different ways. Some find energy in it. They enjoy the process, the movement, the constant refinement. And for them, success becomes a rhythm. They willingly stay inside, while others begin to feel the weight of it, not necessarily because they dislike success, but because of what comes attached to it. Expectations grow, both from others and from within, and there is a quiet pressure to remain consistent with the identity that success has created. And over time, the same achievement that once felt like freedom can begin to feel like something that needs to be protected, something that cannot be lost. And this feeling is not always conscious. It often exists beneath awareness, shaped by years of social conditioning that link success to worth, achievement to identity, and recognition to value. So when someone becomes successful, it does not just change their external life. It subtly changes how they measure themselves, how they interpret effort, and how they respond to stillness. And in many cases, stillness becomes uncomfortable, not because there is anything wrong with it, but because it no longer aligns with the internal system that has been built around constant movement, and modern life amplifies this even further with continuous exposure to curated success, endless comparison, and a constant stream of stimulation that makes it difficult to define what enough actually means. Because there is always another level, another example, another person doing more, and even those who are considered highly successful are not outside of this environment. In fact, they are often more immersed in it, where their reference points are no longer where they began, but what is now possible, and possibility has no clear boundary, which makes satisfaction harder to anchor. And beneath all of this, there is an even quieter layer that rarely gets attention, because sometimes success does not create new patterns, it simply reveals existing ones. Tendencies that were always present, such as the need for control, the discomfort with uncertainty, or the desire for approval. And success can amplify these traits while simultaneously masking them. Because when outcomes are positive, there is less reason to question the underlying motivations. The results themselves become the explanation, until eventually they do not. And that is often where a deeper kind of awareness begins, not about success itself, but about the person experiencing it. Yet it is equally important to recognize that not everything has a hidden psychological cause. Sometimes people pursue success simply because they enjoy the process, because they find satisfaction in building, improving, or mastering something. And not every action is rooted in unresolved patterns or deeper emotional needs. Sometimes it is just a preference, a natural inclination towards certain ways of living. And this matters because it challenges the idea that there is a single truth behind success, when in reality, it is experienced differently by everyone. What feels fulfilling to one person may feel exhausting to another. What feels like freedom to one may feel like pressure to someone else, and even the definition of success itself is not fixed. For some, it is recognition. For others, it is independence. For some, it is stability, and for others, it is exploration. And none of these are inherently more valid than the others, which leads to a quieter understanding that success is not something that completes a person. It is something that changes the context in which they understand themselves. It brings clarity in certain areas while introducing complexity in others. It answers some questions while creating new ones that were not visible before, and perhaps that is the part that often goes unspoken. Not that success is disappointing, but that it is more layered than it appears, more personal than it is presented, and less final than it is imagined to be, and in the end, the differences in how people experience all of this are not problems to solve. They are reflections of how varied human perception can be, shaped by personality, environment, and individual meaning, and sometimes recognizing that there is no single way to experience success. No universal emotional outcome tied to it is what allows a person to step back and see it more clearly, not as something that defines them completely, but as one part of a much broader, more nuanced human experience.